Derek has $31,000 sitting in a checking account that pays him 11 cents a month in interest. He built that balance over 6 years, dollar by dollar, specifically so he'd never have to panic if something went wrong. And by every conventional measure, he did everything right. He hit the 6-month rule people always talk about. He never touched it. He checks the balance and feels a small wave of relief every time. What Derek doesn't know is that his safety net has been quietly shrinking for years, not in the number on the screen, which hasn't moved, but in what that number can actually buy. He hasn't lost a single dollar. He's lost the equivalent of roughly 9 months of groceries in real value. And nobody ever told him that was happening, because nothing about his account ever looked like a loss. Here's the part that catches almost everyone off guard. Money sitting in a typical checking or basic savings account isn't neutral. It's actively losing purchasing power every single month, because prices rise faster than that account pays you. If prices are climbing at roughly 3% a year, and your account is paying you close to nothing, the gap between those two numbers is coming directly out of your emergency fund's real value, silently, with no notification, no red warning icon, nothing that would ever prompt Derek to open his banking app and think something is wrong. The dollar amount stays the same, or even ticks up slightly. What that dollar amount can actually cover in a real emergency, a job loss, a medical bill, a car repair, keeps getting smaller. Let's put real numbers on this, because the abstraction is exactly where people stop paying attention. Derek's $31,000, sitting at an interest rate close to zero, while inflation runs around 3% a year, loses roughly $930 of real purchasing power in a single year. Over 5 years, without him ever spending a cent of it, that same balance has lost more than $4,500 in what it can actually buy, even though the number on his statement has barely changed. Now compare that to Yolanda, a nurse who keeps the exact same size emergency fund but split it deliberately. She earns close to 4.5% annually on the bulk of it in an FDIC-insured high-yield savings account, fully liquid, available within a day if she needs it. Over that same 5 years, instead of losing $4,500, in real value, her fund gains value, even after inflation eats into it. The difference between Derek and Yolanda isn't risk tolerance. They're both holding the exact same kind of asset, cash. One of them just parked it somewhere. That was never designed to protect it. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because this isn't really about interest rates. It's about a piece of financial advice that got frozen in time decades ago and never updated. The 6 months of cash rule became common wisdom back when basic savings accounts routinely paid 4, 5, sometimes 6%, rates that roughly kept pace with inflation on their own. Nobody had to think about where the emergency fund sat, because almost anywhere paid enough to hold its ground. That environment changed dramatically. Savings rates at the big traditional banks collapsed toward zero, but the advice never got an update. People are still following instructions written for a completely different financial climate, and the result is millions of otherwise careful savers unknowingly bleeding value out of the one account that's supposed to protect them. This reveals a deeper pattern most people never examine, which is that an emergency fund actually has two completely different jobs, and most people only design for one of them. The first job is availability, being able to access the money instantly, without penalty, without a waiting period, the moment something goes wrong. The second job is preservation, making sure the money is still worth something by the time you need it. Basic checking accounts are excellent at the first job and terrible at the second. Most people, understandably focused on never being caught short, optimize entirely for availability and never even realize preservation was a separate requirement. They were failing at the whole time. The fix isn't complicated, but it requires treating your emergency fund less like a single pile of cash and more like 3 distinct layers, each doing a different job. The first tier is a small amount, roughly 1 month of essential expenses, sitting in an ordinary checking account for true zero-friction access, a bounce check, an unexpected same-day expense. The second tier, the bulk of the fund, sits in an FDIC-insured high-yield savings account, or a low-risk money market fund, still accessible within a day or two, but actually earning a rate that keeps pace with or beats inflation. The third tier, for people who've built up more of a cushion than they'll realistically need, can sit in short-term government treasury bills, still extremely safe, still liquid within days if truly necessary, but earning more than either of the first two tiers, while you hopefully never need to touch it at all. Derek's entire $31,000 was sitting in Tier 1, doing a job that only needed about a tenth of that amount. Now here's the contrarian insight that changes how most people should think about their own number. Most people don't actually need 6 months of their full salary sitting in cash. They need a lean emergency number, calculated from essential fixed expenses only. Rent or mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, minimum debt payments, not their entire lifestyle spending. Derek's full monthly income is around $5,200, but his actual essential expenses, the number that matters in a real emergency, come out closer to $3,100. 6 months of his income is over $30,000. 6 months of his real essential costs is closer to $18,600. That difference, over $12,000, was sitting completely idle, earning nothing, losing value every month when it could have been split between a higher yield second tier and even modest long-term investing without weakening his actual protection at all. The evidence for this shift shows up clearly once people actually run their own numbers, instead of relying on the general rule. Financial researchers who study household liquidity consistently find that most emergency funds are either dramatically underfunded, leaving people one bad month from real crisis, or significantly overfunded and misallocated, sitting entirely in low-yield accounts, out of habit rather than any actual strategy. Very few households land in the middle, with a fund that's both appropriately sized and properly positioned to hold its value. The overfunded group isn't in danger of running out of cash. They're in danger of watching a meaningful chunk of it quietly evaporate in real terms over the years, especially the ones, like Derek, who built the habit early and then simply never revisited it. Here's the emotional weight of what we're actually talking about. Derek isn't reckless. He isn't careless. He did the responsible thing that every piece of conventional advice told him to do, and he's still losing money every single month because the instructions themselves were outdated. That's a genuinely frustrating position to be in, doing everything right by the book and still coming out behind. And it's worth sitting with that discomfort for a second instead of rushing past it, because the fix here doesn't require more discipline from Derek. It requires better information, which he never had access to until right now. So here's exactly what to do with this. First, calculate your real lean number. Add up your essential fixed monthly expenses only. Multiply by 3 to 6 months, depending on how stable your income is, and treat that as your actual target, not a blanket rule based on your full salary. Second, split what you have into the 3 tiers: a small immediate access checking cushion, the bulk in an FDIC-insured high-yield savings account, or money market fund earning a competitive rate, and any real excess in short-term treasury instruments. Third, revisit this once a year, because rates change, your essential expenses change, and a fund that was properly positioned 2 years ago may already be quietly losing ground again without you noticing. The biggest lesson in all of this is that safety and stagnation are not the same thing, even though they feel identical from inside a bank account. That never seems to lose money. Derek's balance never dropped, so nothing ever felt wrong. But an emergency fund's entire purpose is to protect you when you need it most, and a fund that's quietly losing real value every month is failing at that exact job, just slowly enough that almost nobody notices, until they actually need to use it and discover it doesn't stretch nearly as far as it used to. So let's be honest for a second. If any of that sounded familiar, doing everything the 6-month rule told you to do and still somehow feeling behind, you're not bad with money. You just never got shown the difference between availability and preservation. Here's what I want to know. Are you sitting on a Derek fund right now, or a Yolanda fund? Drop it in the comments below. No judgment either way. I read every single one, and some of my best future topics come straight out of that comment section. And if you'd rather see your own real numbers in black and white than do the math in your head, I made a free tool called the Invisible Leak Calculator. Links in the description. Plug in your balance and your real essential expenses, and find out exactly how many dollars your own fund is losing every year and what your actual lean number should be. If this changed how you look at the cash just sitting there, hit like. That tells the algorithm this actually helped someone instead of just entertaining them. And subscribe, because updating the advice nobody ever updates is basically the whole point of this channel. See you in the comments.